Okay, so we are here with Lyneisha Watson from Florida, cannabis journalist, which is an awesome and I think newly emerging career. I don't think there's a ton of us out there. Yeah. And so let's just start with who you are, a little bit of origin story about how you got into cannabis journalism.
Okay, well, hi, I am Lyneisha Watson. I am a cannabis journalist. I got into the cannabis space about, I think it was 2018. I went to Thread at Yale, and I met Amanda Chicago Lewis, and she is an investigative journalist in the cannabis space. And I was like, cannabis? I'm like, I didn't know people wrote about cannabis. I'm like, that's really cool. I had written about politics. I had done some self-care writing, but I could never really find my niche as a writer. And then when she said cannabis, I just like made it a note in my head, and I went back to think about it over the summer. I was in New Jersey for the summer, and just kind of finding my way. I had just graduated college about 2 years earlier, and I was still like just lost in the world. And I was just thinking about like cannabis. I had a relationship with cannabis. I had used it in college to deal with like anxiety and depression. But I never knew that people have like real relationships with it where they wanted to explore it even more. And so I ended up pitching an idea to High Times, because what I realized is that there weren't a lot of people of color that I knew at the time who were open about their relationship with cannabis. So I pitched my column to High Times. Hi, folks. Because I wanted to highlight that, you know, Black people do have a relationship with cannabis, and the more that we talk about it, the more we can change this narrative. And that's how I got started in the cannabis industry. In my first story, I was actually invited to Atlanta to go to a 420 dinner, and it was my first time having a 420 dinner, and I was so excited. And the woman I ended up meeting, who's my really great friend, is Lakia Gooch, and she's a muscular dystrophy patient in Philadelphia, and she uses cannabis to deal with the pain of her disease. And she introduced me to like this whole new world of like consuming cannabis and just having a relationship with the plant. And you know, from that moment, I was like, oh my goodness, I found what I'm supposed to be doing, because I truly do believe that, you know, as a Black woman, that, you know, we should be exploring many different ways of like self-care and therapy. And so just to like be thrust into the cannabis space it just kind of felt right. Because it was so other from like what I'm used to. Like I'm from the South. I come from a very Christian household. So like this is what I'm doing. Like God does not like what I'm doing, but
well, did you see that poll that just came out that Americans now consider cannabis more morally acceptable than gay marriage, pornography, wearing fur, whole bunch of other stuff? So the tide is definitely turning. How does if you come from a Christian household though, how does your family feel about it?
Well, my mom, she's my mom's pretty young. She had me pretty young, but she's always like been pretty like cool with it. It's just like my grandparents, they're older, they're more traditional. They're really like into like Christian culture. So like I'll introduce them to like CBD, but like I haven't really had the chance to have like that full conversation with them, because I'm still in the place where I'm like educating myself and still trying to understand my own relationship with the plant. But I mean, I think that fuels me even more to know that like education is important, because I had some misconceptions about cannabis before, you know, I was able to develop my own relationship. And I'm like, well, the more I educate myself, the more I'll be able to educate people in my community who are like opposed to it. I was having a conversation about some of the hormones that they're putting in the plant in California the other day, and this guy, he jumped into my conversation. He was like CBD? I'm like, no, not like CBD at all, not like CBD at all. And it's a constant reminder of like how like miseducated we are, especially in Black communities, because of the war on drugs and just because of like fear. Yeah. And it just, you know, now I'm just like, well, I need to educate myself even more so that I can like take this knowledge back to my community. But that's how I got started. It was just like, I'm in Connecticut and I found out that this is a thing. And I'm like, well, I like to do the other thing. I like to do the thing that most people don't do. And cannabis is so other. It's still like such a foreign thing to a lot of people. And, you know, just being in this space, I've met so many people, and you know, I'm still building my own relationship with cannabis, which I love. Like now I know what strains I like, particularly. I know like my favorite time of day to smoke. I know that sometimes I prefer edibles versus like rolling a blunt. But it's a constant learning process. But the most important thing to me is just to tell these stories, and to meet these people and to highlight people who have a relationship with the plant so that they can make it normal.
Yeah, I love that you're using the word relationship,
Mm-hmm.
because I totally feel that way. I grow. I live in the woods in Vermont. I have a big, you know, I can big area to grow. But I do feel like it's one of the primary relationships of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, people talk about their relationships with people. They talk about their relationships with their pets as
Mm-hmm.
a significant source of emotional stability and solace and all that kind of stuff. We talk about our relationship with the world, all kinds of things, but we don't often talk about it as in the kind of classic definition of relationship, where it's a two-way street. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you're giving something to the plant, it's giving something to you, you're having a mutually beneficial engagement, but it really does feel like that's what it is.
No, I often think that cannabis is like my sister. Like I personify her because, you know, when I am depressed, when I am feeling anxious, it's like this, it's just like a blanket. Like it just kind of like warms me from the inside. I'm able to like be a lot more open to myself, and to just to think more and to like figure things out. And you know, I don't often get that with other humans, but when I have cannabis, like it's like I'm just a lot more open, and I appreciate that because it does allow me to like engage so much more with life. We live in like this digital age where it's like so easy to get locked into your phone and like not to really like connect with people. But through cannabis, I've been able to like connect where, you know, most times I am like super shy. I'm like super to myself, but with cannabis, I do feel like I feel like I am myself. Like I feel like all the social programming that I've gotten, all the trauma that I've, you know, lived through, I think like when I'm able to, you know, roll up a joint and smoke some weed, I just feel like I'm able to be myself. And I think that's like really important. And it's not just about the relationship with the plant, but most importantly, it's about the relationship that I'm able to like build with myself.
Yeah.
Um, I often like think about like this idea of like the many faces of Mary Jane. Like um, you you see so much of yourself in the plant. It's like she has so much to show you. Like there's marijuana doesn't come in one form.
Yeah.
You know, she has so many different sides. And I think when you're able to like explore her and explore like the different facets of her, like you find so much of yourself. And I just think it's like so beautiful. I love cannabis.
I do too. I totally hear you. And I have so many questions. Do you feel like it, so coming out of a Christian household, are you still practicing, or do you have a different arc to your spirituality? And does cannabis intersect with that?
I don't practice Christianity. I'm more so like spiritual. I'm like I'm a god, you know, I like try to like elevate myself in a sense. And cannabis does play like a really big role in that. Again, like you so much programming. You're like just so many things are like instilled in you and you have to unlearn them. And like through my relationship with cannabis, I've been able to like let go of like a lot of things, and a lot of the programming that I've received has been like worry and like fear. But through cannabis, like I feel like fearless. I feel like I can like go into a meeting and, you know, tell them what I want. I feel like I can wake up and actually like engage the day. And I think that's like really important. I feel a lot more powerful. And you don't necessarily always feel that with like any type of religious upbringing. In my experience, you really don't feel like that power. You feel like you're giving that power away. And for me, like cannabis reminds me that I am powerful, that I am in control. Like I'm able to meditate with when I'm high. Like I'm able to like just, you know, calm my mind down and just be present. And you don't get that. Like you're always in like this state of like fear and worry with religion. And it is like weird because I am in the South, and I'm in Sanford, Florida.
Mm.
And we're in the heart of the country. You know, there's a lot of churches everywhere. There's a lot of people. My office is in a church. My family, I come from a very religious family. But I do see, like, even if you are a Christian, you should be smoking weed. You should be getting high, because it's just important. Because I think if you're going to talk about God, you have to talk about yourself. And I think that's the missing link a lot of people miss. Like, they forget to, like, put themselves in the equation with God.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've had this thought that Christianity, and this came to me when I was sitting on my weed patch, has the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost.
Mm-hmm.
In a more feminist, earth-based, plant-based paradigm, we could almost have a parallel, like God, mother is the planet,
Mm-hmm.
son, daughter is cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
and the Holy Ghost is the experience you have when you're high,
Uh-huh.
or when you're engaging with her. And I find that she's an incredible source of spiritual revelation. And I've noticed lately that if I wake up in the middle of the night, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the mean voices that show up then want to kick in,
Mm-hmm.
if I get high, sometimes I can go back to sleep, but sometimes I stay awake and I get very thinky, but
Mm-hmm.
that's usually because there's a message that's going to come through.
Mm-hmm.
And cannabis has something to teach me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not going to get to go to sleep until I download whatever it is that she has to
Mm-hmm.
say.
You know, it's interesting. The older I get, the more I'm like open to experiencing my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, like, I would just like kind of suppress everything. But now, like, I smoked a joint a couple of weeks ago, and I was sad after smoking it. And you know, I wasn't used to that, because I'm used to like cannabis like uplifting me. But after a while, like, I was able, like, this is important, like experiencing like the sadness, you know, is important. And I think, again, like those many faces, like, she has so many things to like teach you. She has so many things to show you. And what I often think is, like, they always like, in Florida, we have a THC limit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, THC is like so important. I'm like, why are people afraid of like THC? Why are we afraid of like these otherworldly experiences? That's just always my question. And that's what I truly do want to advocate for, like more THC, like more like good weed, so that we can like have these elevated experiences. I don't think there are things that we should fear. I think there are things that are going to like elevate us and allow us to have even more like engaging human experiences. But cannabis is everything, and I think people, they're afraid to like admit it.
So you talked about too that you feel like you get a sense of the essence of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I would have no way of knowing, of course, but I have to think that given the pressures of systemic racism and white supremacy that we're all talking about right now, that must be an incredibly rare opportunity for any African American, any person of color, but also I would think anyone from an oppressed population, to get a sense of who they are without all of the labels, without all of the pressures of systems, which have something to say about who they are.
With cannabis, I think there's a sense of like freedom. Like, it's just so easy to let go of like the worry. Like, it's so easy to come up with like a solution. It's so easy to like feel love. It's so easy to like feel peace and to feel motivated. And without those things, like, you kind of do feel like the dread of like every day. I'm not going to say that I don't feel like myself, but I feel like myself, like, but operating in America. And you know, it's just like kind of like operating in like this box, like you said, of labels, but without all the labels. Like, when I'm able to like, you know, get high, like, I do feel just like this sense of freedom. Like, I don't want to say I don't care about racism, but it's not like I don't feel like I can't overcome it. You know, I don't feel like defeated by thinking about like just like the systematic things that I see every day in my community. You know, I feel like, wow, I can, like, if I work hard enough, if I stay focused, and if I, you know, engage the right people, if I'm strategic, then I can make change happen in my community, in my neighborhood, in my life. But without that, I do feel kind of low. I'm not gonna lie, I do feel like, and I my theory is that, they don't want us to feel elevated. They want us to feel like we're boxed in all the time. And that may be one of the reasons why down here in the South, things have been like so slow to change. Because when we think about racism, we think about the South, we think about cotton, we think about hemp, we think about slavery down here in the South. And I think that's why, like, there's still like that culture here. There's still that heaviness here. And I think that may be why one of the reasons they've been like so slow to like bring cannabis legalization down here because of, it's just like an energy here that, it can keep you low, and it can like continually feed into you.
I've been trying to participate in the moment by reading as much as I can lately. And, I have what I call empathy attacks, where I'll be reading someone's firsthand account of their experiences. And I think probably I come out of the theater, I'm an actor. So it's my reflexive response to kind of imagine myself into other people's experience. And while there's no way I can actually know, I definitely I take it in. And it's, I can understand why anyone would feel hopeless in the face of everything that we're dealing with. And honestly, at Heady, we've been talking about trying to engage these issues. I've been there 2.5 years and we've been talking about it. And, Vermont is a very white place. And while we can certainly talk about the importance of cannabis legalization from a general criminal justice perspective, it's harder to elevate the social component of that. And as we've been talking more about it, and we're incredibly grateful to be able to kind of surf this wave of public attention, because it makes you feel less alone when you want to talk about it. But we've had pushback from members of our community who don't seem to get it. And it's shocking to me. And there's all the kind of reflexist, knee-jerk, racist rhetoric that we run up against. And we've actually been told by, usually on social media, by members of our community that we have no business getting political and talking about this stuff because we're supposed to be talking about cannabis. And we try to push back and say, wait a minute, cannabis is inherently political. But it's shocking to me that anyone paying any degree of attention right now wouldn't see the connection. So, you're stuck down there in Florida where, it's the history is even more embedded. But even here, there's incredible blindness to what's going on.
Just look at the country. Like, there are parts of the country where people are able to legally enjoy cannabis, but then there are people who are still like in jail. Here, I try to like keep my cannabis consumption like pretty secret because the police are like always like riding around, and you never know what could happen. And I don't know, it's just like a crazy world, but you can't talk about cannabis anything without including Black people. Like you can't. And I know like this is like a new like thing, like white people, like this has been going on for so long, and now like people are starting to become aware of it, and we do like live in like this really weird time. But it's like really important that you engage Black people, that you listen to our stories. We need this plant more than anybody. We need this plant more than anybody, and it's really important that you like engage us and continue to educate your audience and continue to push back at them. Because the cannabis, this is my thing. The cannabis industry is a mirror of America. When I got into the cannabis industry, I was like really naive. I thought that everybody was getting high. So I'm like, if everybody's getting high, there's going to be no racism. But then I met the racism. I met the racism when it came to like being paid for articles. I met the racism when it came to like just getting opportunities. Like I've never been to California. I've never had the chance to like tour a cannabis farm, and it's usually because of like economics. Like I'm not getting paid a lot of money to like have the full cannabis experience. But I do realize, like, regardless of all that, it's still important that I be present in this industry. And for a while, I was like really discouraged because, again, I live in a place where I don't have access to legal weed. And cannabis is medicine. Like, I would love to like be able to smoke medicine legally every day to like help with my mental health, but I can't do that. And so I don't know, like, it's weird. It's really hard to explain, but keep pushing back and keep educating yourself, because it's really important. Like, we cannot have a successful cannabis industry. We can't have a successful anything in this country if we don't include Black people. And it's like really crazy that you know cannabis makes me feel so human. It makes me feel so connected. So when I hear like people will say racist things under the influence of cannabis, it's weird to me, because I know that cannabis, like, is this plant that's supposed to connect us all. So it's just like kind of weird. It makes me question, well, how does cannabis like affect everybody? How does like cannabis make everybody feel? How does cannabis help everybody deal with like certain problems? But for me, like, it just allows me to be open to like the world and be open to different individuals. So when you say you get pushback, it is surprising, but it's not surprising. But you have to like continue to push back, because nobody can be successful in this world without, like, you can't exclude us, and it does suck to be excluded, but like when we have like platforms like this that help elevate our voices, it's really important. Even though people don't want to hear it, they have to, because it's really important.
Yeah.
It's really important that we be heard right now.
Yeah, I think my husband is a psychotherapist, and he had been a theater artist for many, many years, and then did a big switch. And when he went through his training program, they were very pointed about saying, you are now social justice warriors. This is part of your job. And so we've been talking about this for a bunch of years now. And one of the things that he started thinking about was the challenge of the binary nature of racism. Of, if people say either you're a racist or you're not, it shuts down the conversation. And because being called a racist is abhorrent to most people with a soul. And so it shuts down their ability to consider how they might have been influenced by the larger culture, or what they might have absorbed unconsciously. And no one wants to reflect on that stuff, because it's embarrassing and it's horrible. And, I think about, like, I remember I read the autobiography of Malcolm X in high school, and my first response, and I grew up in Portland, Oregon, not a very multicultural place, but like every time I saw a Black person on the street, I wanted to run up and apologize to them, which I knew was not appropriate. But it's sort of like, what do you do? And so I think people get caught up in the details of what's okay for them to do or feel or think. And when they find themselves, when they find thoughts in their head that they find abhorrent, all of a sudden they have to reject it, because otherwise they have to label themselves with something awful.
I think it's important that we take like a really deep look at how racism affects the lives of like people of color. Not only is it like affects us in a way that we're not able to advance in the world, and it's privilege. And I always think of privilege like you have the privilege to think differently about yourself, while I have to, fight with my brain, while I have to fight with my thoughts to be like, no, you matter. No, you have value in the world. No, you have access. No, you have resources. And I think if we explain to people that like this, white people are born with privilege, and nobody wants to admit that they're privileged. Nobody wants to admit that. But if we think about it in the way that these children are affected, where they're not getting access to the right books, they have to like eat shitty school lunches, while their white counterpart may be able to bring lunch from home, which is like nutritious. They go home to parents who are tired and work to this, where they can't engage with their children, while the white child may go home and have like a nanny, or the white child may go home and have a parent who's going to engage with them. And it's just a privilege. It's a privilege to think differently, and to like elevate yourself. And I know that that's a hard thing for a lot of people to accept, but I think it's not a bad thing to say that you have privilege, but you use your privilege to elevate people. You use your privilege to, lift people up. If you have access to things, make them available to people that you deem are worthy and who are going to use that to their advantage, and we don't want to take anything away from anybody.
Right.
You know, we just want to be included. We just want to, you know, be able to like create. I was just having a conversation with somebody, and she said, what if like James Baldwin didn't have to spend a lot of his time talking about racism, you know, talking about all the ills of America? He was truly able to write and create all the things that he wanted to create. And, you know, a lot of Black creatives feel the same way. What if I wasn't always on trying to be a social justice warrior, always being tapped to talk about Black issues? What if I could just talk about, you know, what I wanted to talk about without, you know, having to talk about my experience as a Black person, you know? And I think just being able to realize that, you know, privilege is important. Like, privilege is something that we must talk about, and it's nothing to be afraid of. You know, I can't help that you have privilege, but, you know, it's something that you can think about, and it's something that you can include the people in your community in on, and just give them access. A lot of the time, I work for a nonprofit, and a lot of the time what we're realizing is that we just don't have resources. And if we had resources, then like we wouldn't be going through a lot of what we're going through. But a lot of we don't have access to resources. If we want to get resources, it's like this whole thing that we have to go through. It's this whole process. It takes forever. While like Susie can go get something and it'll be like super quick. It'll happen super fast. And it's just like a lack of resource and the ability to think differently. And I think if people just take the time and think about it for a little bit without like, it's not a bad thing, you know. You can help people, you can elevate people, but just like really think about how deeply racism is affecting the lives of Black people. Black children are born every day without sometimes even a home to go to. You know, they're depending on the government for so many things, and the government isn't, you know, stepping up. You know, so there's just like a huge lack of resource, and we don't want to take anything away. We just want to be equal. We just want to have access to things, and I think that's really important to like realize and to, you know, just kind of internalize.
Yeah, I see some people reacting, and I think what's probably going on in the back of their mind is, I'm going to have to give up my home and empty out my bank account for the sake of justice, and recognizing that these are systems issues. And I spent a lot of time in the climate movement, and, you know, we can't feel too guilty for burning fossil fuels because these are the systems that we were born into, or having privilege, but we can take responsibility for the privilege we have and do the best we can to try to enact systems change. And it was interesting when the world shut down because of COVID, fossil fuel use dropped and CO2 levels in the atmosphere dropped. But as soon as we started doing stuff, it popped back up again, which indicates that we can only take so much individual responsibility for our own behavior, because there's much bigger stuff going on that it's hard to have control over. So it's a both and I used to say this to people in the climate world all the time. It's like, yes, we have individual responsibility, but it's not all on us, because there's hundreds, it all got started long before we showed up. And it's going to keep going long after we're here. And so that we just do the best we can to try to engage with it. So let's say we get to wave a magic wand, or you get a MacArthur Genius Grant, or something fabulous happens, and a giant pile of money gets dumped on your head. So you can really write about cannabis in any way you want to, or you get a contract from, let's say, Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone, if you're out there, you really want to hire Lyneisha because she's awesome. What about cannabis would you most want to write about?
I really do love talking to cannabis patients about like why they're using the plant. I think medical marijuana patients have some of the most amazing stories. And I really just want to explore, like I said, the many faces of Mary Jane, finding ways to look at this plant, look at the plant in these various forms, and show how every person interacts with this plant so differently. And I think that's just like, I think like cannabis isn't like Blackness isn't a monolith. Cannabis isn't a monolith. Like, there's so many faces to her, and I would really like want to explore that on a national level, but also go global and go into like these communities where people are using cannabis, like Jamaica, not Venezuela,
Uruguay.
Uruguay, South America, going to Africa, just really exploring like these different cannabis communities and seeing what people's relationship are with these plants. And I think that just exploring cannabis on a global scale, we'll be able to come up with some type of not legislation, but some type of like language on how like we use cannabis across the board, or some type of universal understanding of what this plant actually is to people. I still think that a part of the reason why I do the work that I do is because I still think that we forget to include people into the conversation about cannabis. Like, we talk about business, we talk about government, but we never truly talk about people. All the news articles I read are about like what the government isn't doing or what businesses are doing, but we never talk about the people who are going to be consuming these plants. And like, that's truly my passion. Like, we should be talking to these people, we should be engaging them, and these are the people who are going to change the laws. These are the people who are going to change the narrative. These are the people who are going to normalize cannabis. We need to engage these people, and we need to tell more stories about people in their relationship with this plant. I mean, I'm already doing that, but I would love to do it more and on a bigger scale, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, totally. Well, beautiful. Lyneisha, thank you so much. Lyneisha Watson, cannabis journalist, visionary, storyteller, creative force of the world. I'm so glad to have met you. So glad that you're participating in this conversation, and we will figure out a way to get your voice out there more and more and more. So
thank you so much.
My pleasure. Stop.